All right. Welcome back to another episode of the Apocalypse Podcast. I am one co-host, Kyle, and I have with me my older brother.
I'm Taylor.
And today we are going to be reviewing The Substance, the new hot horror movie everybody's talking about. We're actually going to do this one, try to do it spoiler-free today. The plot is fairly linear and you kind of get the gist of what the movie's going to be fairly quickly, so we are going to discuss like the mechanics of the plot, but it's not really a spoiler because you find out very quickly how the movie is going to work.
And one of the things I think is the strength of the movie is that it doesn't try to, like, even the actual plot itself is like so simplistic, it doesn't invite a lot of that kind of secrecy and stuff. Just reinforces that, is all I'm saying.
Yeah. Okay, so The Substance is this new movie. It's I would call it like an absurdist black comedy body horror movie.
Yeah, I think that's probably a fair
What
description.
it is.
I think one thing that is definitely you have to go in knowing is that it is not, like, you can tell right away, but you need to be in for it. Is like it is and does not take what's happening seriously at all. It is definitely not grounded in reality. It is not in our world.
So to briefly go over the plot, let's give these podcasts a little bit more professionalism in the
Okay, we can try that.
structure here.
I think that's a mature thing to do.
The Substance is about an aging superstar played by Demi Moore, and she gets this. She goes to a doctor, and she gets this little note that basically says, "Hey, this thing changed my life," and it's about this liquid called the Substance, where you sort of grow and create a younger, perfect version of yourself. But the catch is that every week you have to switch back. So you sort of give birth to this younger version of yourself that lives around and walks and does its own thing for a week, and then that will come back and go to sleep and switch spots with you, and then your older self gets up and does its thing for a week, and that's the whole gimmick. And so where things go awry is if one of you, you're both technically the same. They reinforce that point a lot in the movie. Remember, it's not her and you are the same person. Where it goes awry is if one of the clones, I'll just call them clones because that's really what you are. You've sort of split yourself into two clones, but one is younger and one is older. Where one of the clones might take an extra day or even an extra hour, and it fucks up the rhythm, and that's where things kind of go wrong, is where one starts to take too much time and it affects the other one. It's a very weird plot. It's totally like right off the bat you have to just go like, okay, I get it. Like, this is absurd. You just concede that they have this magic gene replicating injection, and yep, clones exist of people, so just go with it.
I mean, like, to be fair, like, it's so absurd that anyone would survive the actual birthing process when you look at...
it doesn't make any sense.
Exactly. So, and what I think was a really cool thing about what helped me understand why would someone want to give birth to a younger version of themselves is they make it very clear, even from that intro when they inject that into an egg yolk and it has the yolk like pop off into its own little yolk, is the implication is you are the Matrix. Everything stems from you. So, like, the Demi Moore's character would experience or feel the feelings that her... Because, like, a clone implies that there's, like, individual identities cloned from the original, but the idea is that the original is experiencing in some way what the younger version does, because why else would Demi Moore continue with it?
See, the thing is that true?
That's the impression I got. Otherwise, why would she continue? Because she's not getting famous for any of this, right? She's not getting the fame that Sue is getting all over.
No, but the thing is, so I was searching for that the whole movie, like, are they actually sharing a consciousness? Do they remember what the other one is doing? I don't think they do, because at least the young one doesn't, because the younger version wakes up at certain points and like looks around the apartment and realizes, something is different or wrong. And she you sort of see the younger version, Sue is her name. The older version is named Elizabeth. The younger version just like came out basically and decided her name was Sue. Anyways, there is absolutely very clear points of discovery from Sue where she realizes what Elizabeth has been doing in her free time. So I know for a fact Sue, the younger version, does not experience what the older one does.
I agree with you. I think it is a one-way track. All Sue's experiences go to Elizabeth, but not Elizabeth.
What makes you think Elizabeth is experiencing what Sue is?
Because why would she continue the procedure after the first time something goes wrong, other than she is getting something out of this? She is feel like it has to. And the way they keep talking about it, it's the Matrix. It's all comes from you. Like, you are connected to her because she is you. For me, it makes it make sense, because why else would Elizabeth continue the process? Because I don't think that Sue is feeling what Elizabeth does. I think Elizabeth gets to feel what Sue does, and which is why she's the one who instigates all the calls. Granted, it's because the younger version is usually breaking the rules, but that's just how I interpreted it.
The younger version starts calling too.
Well, that's when she's getting pissed off about stuff, not about rule breaking, right? Her safety isn't until it is, obviously.
I think that's a point of discussion for this movie is that exact thing, is that even if Elizabeth is not experiencing what Sue is, that's the struggle with the sense of self, sense of identity, sense of needing to be needed and wanted and loved. I think that's part of this whole movie, is trying to figure those things out. Even if you're disconnected from them, Elizabeth knows that Sue is the hot, young version of herself. It's what she used to be. So even if she's not directly getting the experiences, she knows, she's seeing her younger self on TV. She's seeing her younger self on billboards. She's seeing this hot, the hot young body of her younger self even flaunted around. And I think that's part of what this movie is trying to talk about.
That's actually a really compelling argument. Okay, now if you reframe that all right, I haven't actually shared
because
what my thoughts are in the movie. Because I want this
just another thing. Okay, we'll get to that, but just to reinforce what I'm trying to say too, Elizabeth is often watching Sue on TV. Remember, there is a whole sequence where Elizabeth goes crazy and starts just eating. She's watching her younger self on TV and mocking her and shocked at the things she's saying. So I'm going to firmly say they do not share experiences.
Okay, that's actually a good point.
One way or the other. Yeah.
So I wanted to say, I didn't share with you before we started recording my feelings on this. This movie was the least enjoyable movie I have watched in years. I almost turned it off, I think, 3 separate times. I loathed watching this movie. So when I first started, I was in.
Wait. You didn't like watching it, but what does that mean about how you absorbed it?
Exactly. So as time...
A hard to watch but appreciated the movie kind of thing?
So this is what I'll say, is I think that the visual... The way the movie looks, it's incredible. The colors and the symmetry and the weird, nothing was shot in an angle that wasn't in a millimeter away from it was so stylized and weird that
there's no wide angle shots. Everything was so tight.
Everything's on people's mouths as they're talking and chewing and breathing, and it's just so
fucking so gross.
It is such a disgusting movie, but it looks so pretty when it's not no people are involved. I thought that was really cool, but I was getting a little annoyed with how over the top they are with hammering the obvious kind of things that they could be thinking, because the characters, there's not that much dialogue for how long the movie is, right? There's a lot of...
Right.
People don't talk that much in it overall. I think Dennis Quaid might talk the most. But I just felt like the themes were kind of obvious, but they were really hitting over the head with the obvious themes. Because I think this
called ham-fisted.
Yeah, and at first I thought I was in on it as a stylistic choice, but then it kind of felt like I don't know. I was conflicted with if I enjoyed it or not, because what I didn't like actively is like I just don't think a lot of the grossness works for me personally. Like I like gore and stuff, nothing. It does not bother me. I laugh through it. I think it's almost funny to watch, right? But like this movie, almost every scene I could not watch looking at the screen directly. I'd have to turn my head a little bit or wince. It was so visceral because of how gross it is.
Yeah, one of the first notes I took while watching this movie was that it was assaulting.
Yes, it is very.
Every shot feels like I'm being assaulted. It was just, which, I don't know if it's a commentary. The first big shot that did it was pretty quickly into the movie. Demi Moore, has to go into the bathroom, and the female bathroom is closed, so she has to go into the men's bathroom, and then she's in a stall, and Dennis Quaid's character comes in. He's like the manager of Demi Moore's character, Elizabeth. He's the one that's finding this hot young talent. They're basically just doing exercise TV shows, which is funny.
What I love about
80s.
This universe is it's the network, the show, and the New Year's Eve show. Like it's just a vague. It's just a TV network guy. Like he's definitely. It's almost obvious that these are stand-ins for the types of people and the types of shows. But yeah,
of course,
it's like a jazzercise like show that is weird. Anyway, yeah, continue. So Dennis Quaid pops in the bathroom.
Yeah, Dennis Quaid comes into the bathroom, and the way the camera is set, the way the bathroom is shaped, it's a still shot. Like, basically, the camera is what a urinal would see. So you see Demi Moore walk into the bathroom, look around, go into a stall. Then you see Dennis Quaid walk in, and he just marches right up to the camera, and it's like a fisheye wide angle, not wide angle. It's a fisheye shot of his face on a cell phone, just talking as he's peeing, and he's just obnoxious and really loud and talking about how old certain stars are, and I can't believe she's lasted this long.
I like to be clear. He's disgustingly talking about women in a very degrading way. Like it's a very gross and assaulting way to talk about another person. I'm only emphasizing because that's just the introduction to this character in this scene is just so assaulting and gross and nasty, but intentionally.
Which is why, exactly, and. As soon when I realized, he walks right up to the camera and it's this wide angle, Jesus Christ, I keep saying that, I'm an idiot. The fisheye of his face, just talking and laughing. I actually kind of recoiled and pulled my head back. Dude. I was like, oh God, dude, get away from me. Like, which of course made me think about women and made me think about, It's that meme. I don't know if you've seen that meme of like what he sees, what she sees, and it's like from the bottom, it's like a hot girl riding on top of a guy, and then from the girl's perspective, it's just like this sweaty, nasty, gross dude like on top of her.
Yeah, no,
that's what I couldn't help but think about that meme and think about just like women in general. Like, man, just a guy being an asshole in your face like that. And that feels like an assault by itself, which is crazy. And then not
mentioning the types of shit that he says and the things he believes too.
Exactly, and like just thinking about what women in show business might have to endure was like, oh God. Now I will say, as a greater commentary on the movie, it did feel more specific to show business.
This is it feels a little inside baseball. This is about Hollywood.
Yeah, which kind of took me out of it. A movie like, I don't know, Blink Twice, for instance, was tackling the subject matter of like physical and sexual assault and how women have to deal with that. And that felt like a much, that movie was also pretty absurd and bizarre, and there was some concessions you had to make. But it handled the subject matter in a much more grounded, almost relatable way and made me feel for women more. But this movie, it just felt, like you said, more inside baseball. I was like, I can't relate to this in any way. Obviously, I can't as a man anyway, but I can at least empathize with a movie like Blink Twice. I can empathize with what these women have to go through. I suppose. But in this, I was like, I don't know how real or what any of this is speaking to exactly, so I can imagine, a woman gets sexually assaulted. I can't imagine, I don't know, maybe I'm talking myself into a hole here.
So this is what my perspective on it is, that it is more about, I think, maybe the general. It's more about the presentation side of what a woman would have to experience, and like think about it because this would apply to any type of modeling, any like where a woman is the like a visual represent, like has to show off, and like what, and when people start
and
to
her fame stems from her looks.
yeah, and like just the vanity world, just being vain, I guess, in general, like anything that involves about being vain, and because you could extrapolate that, because like it doesn't necessarily, like it could just be talking about women being, because this was written and directed by a woman, so it's like definitely those things are gonna be much more honest and I think more accurate than if a guy attempted to feel or experience those things. But I totally lost my train of thought, so it's fine. But just like the general idea of just like what they have to present to other people to be accepted and to continue going on, and like how objectifying and can do to people and what it does to them.
Yeah.
And so
right, which is, I obviously totally understand all of those, all that commentary, but there were specific points, I guess maybe is what I'm trying to articulate. I guess I'm kind of rambling because I'm having a hard time. Maybe
no, I hear what you're saying.
Yeah, it just felt inside baseball. Maybe that's all we need to say.
Yeah,
people will
for sure.
Like, it just, some parts were like, I don't really know how show business works, so I guess this happens. Okay.
Yeah. So I think a lot of the political, if you want to call it political, but the themes of the movie, I think they feel true, and I think that there is a beautiful representation of this like body horror version of this, and even like the way that Sue behaves in the selfish way feels so in tune with like how a young person would use kind of the people that help bring them into this world in this position, and how maybe they don't realize the damage they're like. I think there's some really interesting things to read into it. And I kind of liked
the recklessness of youth as well.
Yeah, and I think they even show
just not having an idea of what age does to you, and what maybe older people have sacrificed that you have yet to experience. And
but I also think it shows the from the other side too, of like from Sue's perspective of how like Elizabeth getting angry at Sue's success in a way, and like kind of retaliating against her a little bit with like trashing the place, right?
Yeah.
And like seeing how from then Sue's perspective, how could you not be angry and feel slighted about that? It's like they're trying to show both ends, the kind of where those things can go wrong, and how like we don't treat people maybe as well as we could, and things like. I just thought those are all done well without taking me out of the movie. It felt like I was there the whole time. This movie moves so fast for 2.5 hours too. It drags.
Right.
It felt like a long movie in some ways, in that like I don't know how you sustain this for another hour and a half. Like I'd pause.
Yeah, there was.
I'm like,
okay, yeah, we had the same exact thought. I had to go pee at one point, and I paused it. And I was like, how the fuck is there another hour left? It feels like
you're running out of
shit
gas.
is hitting the fan. Yeah.
Because like, what is it? By the time that Sue awakens for the second time, she already breaks a rule. Like it's pretty quick.
Pretty much, yeah. Very fast.
So first, the actual I loved everything. The substance company, just like this dude on the phone, like doesn't respond until you give your code number. Just like punctual. He has like 5. I don't know. It was really cool. I just love that secret weird warehouse. It implies there's
so the substance is not manned by any physical person. You never see anyone. So how Elizabeth gets the substance is she goes to a doctor's office, and this very pretty young man is like kind of inspecting her in a more anatomical way, and like touching her spine, and says something like, yes, you'll actually be a fine subject. And Demi Moore's like, what? And he's like, I meant you're fine. And she walks out of her doctor's office because she gets in a car accident early in the movie, which I actually forgot about until this second.
Oh my god, yeah, duh.
It's just an excuse. Well, I guess it does two things. Number one, it kind of forces her into retirement. And number two, it gets her to go to the doctor's office.
Yeah, exactly.
So it does two things, which looking back on it, in the beginning of the movie, it opens up with Elizabeth doing her jazzercise, dancing, talking to the camera, going, come on, ladies, next we're going to squat and whatever the fuck. And then the show ends, and then the camera kind of pulls back, and it pulls you into the movie, and Demi Moore walks off set, and people start saying like, "Oh, by the way, happy birthday," and she's like, "Oh yeah, thanks." So immediately you get the sense that she's really not that important. No one cares about her. She's still, even after 50 years of doing this jazzercise shit or whatever however long it's been, her birthday, the one day a year people are supposed to celebrate you is still just not even about her.
It's just a work
really
day.
Cares. She's just a product. Yeah.
What I think is also cool about in that scene, they're also the shot is kind of like sideways. You can see the wall next to her, and it's all these different posters of the varying shows that Elizabeth has been the host of. Just trying to really emphasize
all the years,
this bitch has been around. Like, because the posters imply like since Demi Moore was a young woman, like it looked like AID aging, like. Like kind of what she would look like in her 20s. So imply that this woman has been working for this network, this company, and been doing shows for 20 plus years at this point.
Right. And what I was going to say too, I don't know if there was some kind of commentary on the fact that it's her birthday, but that's the same day she gets in the car accident and essentially is forced to retire.
Yeah, I think that's basically like, because the implication here is just she was going to be forced out anyway. Like Dennis Quaid basically saying in that bathroom call that like bitches get old and they're forced out. That's just the way it is. And that like in the car crash is almost like a physical representation of the like quiet force out. I was like, all right, well here the universe is like forcing you out. So yeah, I feel like it's just kind of there's no coming back. She can't go somewhere else, Like, this is it. No. It's over.
So, what I was talking about was the substance, the company. She ends up leaving this doctor's office, pulls out this note out of her pocket with this USB drive that has the word "the substance" on it and a phone number on the back. And the note just says, this changed my life. So she ends up calling this number, and like Taylor said, it's just this guy who barely speaks, just like one-word answers whenever he can. He's very, very matter-of-fact. He has no feeling at all for anything. So she ends up, she says, like, I'd like to order the substance, and he's like, write this down. And then he says the address one time and hangs up the phone, and so Demi Moore has to, like, scroll down the address. She ends up finding this address in this alley. It's this steel door. She uses this card that they mailed her to open this door that only opens up like 2 feet. So you have to like crouch down and basically crawl into this little
what a metaphor,
building.
Man. Force them to like kind of like crawl in the dirt.
Yeah, literally like get on your hands and knees and beg for this. And so then she walks into this building, and it's just a really long hallway into a bright white room with boxes, like lock boxes on the wall. And still you haven't seen a single person associated with this company. She uses this same kind of key card to unlock her box with her number on it. It's kind of like a hotel key card. She just scans it and the box opens and it's got the substance in it, and then she leaves. And every week she has to go back to get the refill. And that's how the company works. And if you ever have problems, you call, you get the same guy on the phone who just speaks very matter-of-factly, tells you how it is, and hangs up.
Oh, one thing I will like, too, is that, like, you can leave, too. Like, you can just tell him, like, I don't want to do this anymore. And he's like, okay.
Right, yeah, you can stop at any time.
They're not villainous in any way, shape, or form. I've never, like, maybe the product they're doing is, like, even the product itself isn't inherently, like, if you followed the rules, it seemed like it'd be great. Like, in theory, like, the substance and the company are not in any way the reason the bad things happen. Like only
that's true.
Only the fact that like she used it caused the problems, but it was because they defied the rules, and the rules that set like were clear and clean, and everything went according to But I just thought that was interesting.
Yeah, that's a good point. There's nothing inherently evil or wrong with this substance. It's just a breakthrough miracle in science, and it works exactly how it's supposed to, and it's up to the people to use it correctly. It
seems like it's free.
Here's the power, use it how, as Uncle Ben said, with great power comes great responsibility.
Yep.
And that's what this movie is.
Yeah, that's definitely it. One thing is I thought it was so funny. I think there's a really interesting parallel of when Sue starts her show, when she's a new hot thing that goes to work and they give her a show of how just like hardcore sexual. The jazz,
straight up pornographic.
I thought it's so
Yeah.
funny, and like
It's crazy. It is funny.
And then when they're like, "Oh, what's your name?" and she like the sexiest voiced angle, she goes, "Sue." It's just like the ugly
Yeah.
old woman name. I don't know. I thought that had to mean something. Just like the name and the delivery of it was so sexual, but to me, I almost laughed because it felt like,
Oh, I did laugh.
Okay.
It was ridiculous.
Yeah.
It's so over the top. And the thing is, like, Sue barely speaks the whole, so Elizabeth takes the substance, and basically what happens is which her bathroom, by the way, it looks like the room in Saw. It's just a white tiled wall, white tile floor, like complete.
Yeah, I keep skipping.
Even
over.
while watching the movie, I can't think the fucking word. It's like where procedures would be done for you, surgery room,
Procedure
whatever
rooms,
it's called.
yeah, surgery rooms. I
Yeah,
don't
but
know.
that's like not the quite
Operating
the right
room.
term.
I don't know.
Yeah, sort of. But yeah, it's just completely sterile in there. And so yeah, Elizabeth takes the substance, and her like eyeball splits into two eyeballs and starts zipping around, and then her like back splits open, and this young version is birthed out of her spine, essentially. So immediately you're like, okay, physically this doesn't make any fucking sense, but
Yeah, there's two things
in.
I want to point to. One, I loved the Elizabeth opening the package and how like Amazon-fied, like step one, do this, packet 1 first, and it has instructions for packet 1 and 2 and 3, and I was just like,
like you inject this once, you stabilize once per day, you switch back once per week. That's it.
Yeah.
Those are all the steps. Right there.
I remember I was thinking during this sequence, I was like, I bet you Kyle would really enjoy this. Like, here's the rules, and like a very distinct, like, and it's
I certainly would.
and it's presented in a way that makes sense. It's like, you inject into your veins, the thing pops out, here's your bag of food, and then the other person like sews up her back, and I like that they don't even attempt to make. You don't understand what goes on in Sue's brain, the new creature that emerges. It's just like, you just kind of, she's full speed. She's just a clone. She knows everything. She's just like, whatever Elizabeth knew about this procedure, she kind of was able to piece together relatively quickly. But before you...
She wasn't... That's true. I guess I didn't really think about that this clone gets birthed, this split version of you comes out of you, and she didn't really have that many questions. She kind of like looks at her arms and kind of starts looking at herself in the mirror like, holy shit, this is, I guess it's because presumably...
The reason I think...
See, I don't know. This would be more of a deep dive thing. It's hard to...
Exactly.
I don't know why this young version would just accept that all this is the way it is so quickly. Does she have the memories of Elizabeth? I don't know.
When they are breaking down the science to Elizabeth, when she's first like talking to them, they talk about the splitting off is very much like... They show like Play-Doh, and that putty pulls and puts it to the side, like this is this new version. So
she definitely has all the memories of Elizabeth.
Yes,
then.
yeah. There's this kind of like implied she's inherited all the knowledge. That's why she knew about the network and where to go for auditions. Like
and the audition, and came in there and just owned it because she'd already done all this before.
Yeah, it's just like she has all the knowledge but no memories. That's kind of and then she kind of pieced together just based on that. So that's kind of my general idea here. And I wanted to say is that, ironically, I think the birthing scene is the least gross the movie ever gets. It's surprising.
Pretty much, it gets nasty.
It's surprising. Like, I don't want to say it's like tasteful, but it was surprisingly not like grotesque the way that I would describe a mass of flesh bursts out your spine and forms a body is not nearly as gross as it could be. It was more gross even when they showed her like doing the stitches, the needle going through the flesh was.
Yeah, sure.
As someone who's really desensitized to needles going into skin, they want you to see... Like, I was freaking out when Elizabeth was going to inject the Mountain Dew into her veins, because I want to be clear, the substance is like neon green.
Oh, yeah, it's a bright neon green. It literally looks like Mountain Dew.
Yeah, so it was like this... I was freaking out because like that is this thing is gonna hurt so bad. It is so evil. I just don't trust it. Like I was freaking.
By the way, you have Taylor has type 1 diabetes. For
Oh
those who
yeah,
don't remember. So that's why he's used to needles going in the skin.
I just
to clarify that.
it
He's
is not
a
a
heroin addict or anything.
No, it is not from injecting.
He doesn't have a needle fetish or anything.
No, that's
He's
true.
Just a type 1 diabetic.
Yes, thank you for that save because that escaped my brain. But yeah, so
yeah, the Mountain Dew injection was like holy fuck.
yeah. So I really love that sequence, and that's probably the most fun I had. And then like when the Sue stuff started, I was starting to get really. There's a lot of stuff that happens that's like we don't need to talk about the plot details at this point. Just kind of let those things unfold, and I do love that they like the very next time when she just stays like it's like an hour. My one kind of beef is more like what I feel like is like kind of a Kyle complaint where it's like the logic of the universe doesn't make sense here, and that's really taking me out of it. Where it's like it's not a big deal, but it was nagging at me a little bit. But
what was
how long they can go without food before their bodies are just like crumpling into dust.
Oh, you mean like as soon as the feed bag gets used up, the clone or the whoever's unconscious like starts dying, basically.
Yeah, and just like falling apart. Like I'm not necessarily against that concept because like let's say you're in a weird coma state. Who knows what they can make up.
Right. So how it works more specifically, let's clarify how it works here. When you're split in half, the person who's awake, let's say in this case, it's after Elizabeth injects herself to make the clone. Sue, the young version of herself, gets birthed out of her back and spine, and then Elizabeth, the older version, is still lying on the floor unconscious. Her eyes are open, and she's kind of making sound, so you get the idea. Obviously, she's still alive, but she's sort of in a comatose state. And then Sue, the young, hot version, has to take one of these feed bags that lasts a week. It's sort of like a big IV bag full of just kind of beige cream that we assume is some kind of life sustenance. They take this IV bag full of food, puts the needle into old Elizabeth's body on the ground, and then that sustains her for a week while Sue goes and does her own thing. Now, as soon as that bag is empty, there's a sequence in the movie, probably only like 20, 30 minutes in, where, Sue is starting to take extra time because she's young and enjoying her life, and she just wants an extra couple hours because she brought this dude home that she wants to bang. But Elizabeth's old body has like sucked every ounce of feed out of this IV bag, and the bag is like crumpling and shrink wrapping, and like you can tell her body's really trying to suck every drop out of this bag, and she's like starting to like cough and gag and make noises and shit. And I think that's what Taylor's referring to, that like the millisecond she ran out of food, it seemed like her body was dying.
So
which
the reason
is
I bring up that
a
scene
little silly, even in this world. It's like, okay, come on,
is that they're kind of establishing the edges of, okay, this is what happened when Elizabeth doesn't stabilize once a day because she was also over for her stabilization shot from.
True, you got to stabilize once a day.
Yeah, and
yes.
They do that by the young person would stab into Elizabeth's spine and pull out this fluid.
Spinal fluid, yeah.
That then Sue injects in herself once a day to keep her body from basically deteriorating to a pile of flesh. Is what is like the implication is like the body.
Blood starts coming out of her nose. Blood starts coming out of her ears. So you get the idea that something's going wrong and she's dying presumably. And to stabilize, you pull the spinal fluid out of your old self and inject it into the young self, and you stabilize. That's what I was saying earlier. You stabilize once per day, switch once per week. That's the routine.
And so they kind of set that scene up, in my opinion, to establish here are the consequences when they just bend the rules just a little bit. Like, it's just an hour or two. What is the worst that can happen? And you get to see the consequences of it, and it's just like so gnarly. Oh, dude, the effects of this movie. Oh, so gross.
Good. Yeah, I read about it. They had to redo the prosthetics because most prosthetics end up being bulky and not looking right, and the director specifically wanted it to be very realistic, which means creating extremely thin prosthetics.
Wow. Yeah, because that looked real as hell to me.
Yeah, when you look at the prosthetics, you're like, God, how did they kind of green screen actual old person's body parts onto Demi Moore? You don't really understand how they did it, but it's because they worked really hard to get these incredibly thin, realistic prosthetics that just look real. So yeah, Well, go ahead.
But yeah, so they established that, and then I guess I think I've kind of answered my own question. I think we've talked, I think I've answered some of it. Is like, so eventually when Sue goes on a extended leave, let's say, where is she getting the 50 food bags? And what I'm now realizing is, oh, she's just using her food bag. She's not thinking about like when she switches back. She's been like getting the refills and stuff.
Yeah, I didn't think about that either. So that means what then? Sue, the younger version, has been calling the substance company and saying, "Okay, I need my refill," because you have to do that. You have to call them once a week and say, like, "Yep, I want to continue. Give me the next week's subscription." And they go, "Okay."
Are you sure? What I remember is that they would get Elizabeth would just get something in the mail that says your pickup is now ready.
Oh, maybe you're right.
And I think
so it's just fairly automated until you say stop.
Yeah, but my problem is in the first. You can never have more than the exact 2-week period, right? They never.
Yeah, they give you.
So there doesn't seem to be a way, I think, for that to be possible. But I realize that like I'm probably logicking myself out of what the intended like it doesn't. The movie isn't trying super hard to be like grounded in reality as much. There's a lot of stuff, but like I feel like they're so rigid about the rules at the same time, and they flash it on screen. You are one, like these type of things that I feel like I just misunderstood something, or it feels like, man, I don't.
No, I mean you're right. If they get an automated subscription once a week with the feed bags and the needles and all the shit you need, she could just keep going and going and going and not have to stop, because every week she gets the food. And instead of sharing it between the two selves, you just dump it all into the old version and keep her comatose on the ground.
Yeah, and so then that is where, now looking back, I think I just missed it, right? So then it became a thing of like, I don't understand how this is possible, and I started to get a little, and then it started to be very gross instead of very violent. Like the body horror in this isn't so much like. A lot of it is dreams, which are, or like, I can't tell if it's real or not. And part of that I was getting.
No, there's like two very specific dream kind of sequences.
And I don't know necessarily how I feel about them, but I tend to not like using a dream as a way to be like, oh, see, we're a horror movie. Like, it feels cheap sometimes.
Yeah.
And it was just like really gross, and not in a like negative way as much as like I think I can't handle gross like grease and things like food where food shouldn't be, like things that like just that stuff like for me is my ick. I can't. I crumple. It's just so that movie at some point it broke that wall, and I think I started to get like almost mad at it. I was like, "Fuck you! Yeah, of course that's what's happening. Yep, sure, just do that. Yeah, of course." And it just started to like, I started to get like mad. I don't know. It was wild.
We didn't actually say what are we rating this movie? What are you giving?
Okay. After I watched it, I was gonna give it a 0 if possible, or a 1.
Oh my god, you hated it that much.
Or a 1 based on its visual merits alone. I was telling Brianna right afterwards, like, I don't think I've hated a movie like this in recent memory. And it made it worse because I could see this movie is so well made and so creative and so cool. So I wanted that to be like clear that it is like, I think it wasn't to my tastes the level of the horror type it was that I was starting. And like the last act, I think I was in the wrong headspace to enjoy the like how it descends into chaos. I was almost just like, all right, fuck you. That's what it kind of felt like at the end. Like they just couldn't think of a compelling thing to do. But now I'm looking back, I'm like, actually, it's super sick and awesome. But my biggest problem, which is kind of a spoilery thing, is they imply the danger of how gross it is with that spot in the spine when it starts to get really pussy.
Yeah, the back infection, because Sue, the young self, kept pulling spinal fluid from the exact same fucking hole. That was a part of the movie I had a hard time looking at.
And obviously I did too.
Pussy, black-fleshed, nasty back infection. I was like, oh my god.
So this is actually I will say, I'm going to have to dip into spoilers to talk specifically about the sequence that broke me. So I'll say.
Hold on. I don't think you need to.
Okay. All right. So
I think you've demonstrated what you don't like about it.
I will let me
I think that's fine.
add that to this is when Elizabeth wakes up from the extended period, the long period.
Yeah.
I feel like they oversold the reveal of how much damage it does versus what her body is able to do literally 5 minutes later.
Oh yeah, I had the same thing.
And that's where
yes.
I was
yes. We don't have to talk about this too much more.
Right, and
I genuinely want to avoid spoilers. I want people to be able to listen to this.
My only other part was just like, so that to me started taking me out, and the fact that how gross they made the spinal location look, it like didn't mean anything. She just kind of was like, "Oh, my back hurts." Like I was like, "Really?" They made it seem like this was.
Yeah, at one point she touched it and went like, "Ah," and winced really hard, and I was like, "Oh, this is going to be something."
And it just
then,
isn't.
It sort of fizzles. It never turns into anything. And you're right. Yeah, the latter half of the movie, it even within this world, it didn't quite feel right the way she was physically able to behave versus what they were trying to portray.
So that was what had happened is I think that they hadn't sold the switch to like almost Looney Tunes level of like kind of wackiness to me yet. Like I just wasn't there yet, and they kind of kept going faster than I could keep up, and I had fallen off the train by then, so I couldn't enjoy. So that's why I was getting so mad about it. But the more I think about it, looking back...
Okay, so you're saying, yeah, the way you're describing it, right, you want to give it a 0 or a 1, but it sounds like you want to give it that out of... So when I review movies, I try very hard to take into account the merit that it does deserve, and not just purely my enjoyment. That is why... not ironically, I guess, but that's why I like Letterboxd so much, that it has the rating system and the like system. Because there have been plenty movies where I give it a 1 star because on a technical level, it is just complete fucking dog shit garbage, but I really enjoyed watching it. You know, a so bad it's good type movie.
Okay,
it's like,
cool.
Yes, this movie is actually terrible, but I really enjoyed watching it, so I like it. To me, it sounds like you're giving this movie probably like a 3 or 4 out of 5, but you absolutely did not like it.
And I would say at least a 4. Like I think
you think it was that great. Okay.
Maybe 4.5 if possible. In terms of like if I was, it's kind of like it is everything I would want in a movie of its type. It's just like the sub genre or the way it was delivered just wasn't to my taste or like my. It's like the best comedy movie, but in a genre comedy I don't find funny. You know, it's like I recognize visually what it's doing. I thought the performances were all so perfect. The movie...
God, Demi Moore was so fucking good. She actually was so good.
I know. I loved everyone. Like, I thought, like, it was really only 3...
Sue just didn't have much to do.
Yeah, and she was like
She really had like 5 lines of dialogue in the whole movie, and it was all just,
very grounded. Like, she's the one who's kind of, like, reacting to the world in a way that I think most people would... versus everyone else who seemed to be like the insane people that are making this a hyper realistic fake world. But yeah, so if I had to split it up, I almost want to do it in if you like this type of if that all that stuff worked for you, that thing's easily a 4 out of 5 for me. Like if that's
absurdist comedy body horror. That really is what this movie is. It's an absurdist black comedy body horror.
I want to see her previous work,
satirical.
Revenge.
Yeah, her previous movie was just called Revenge. Yeah, it was a rape revenge movie,
and it seemed to be. Go ahead.
Love rape. No, I'm just kidding. Sorry.
Jesus Christ.
No. No, I love revenge movies. I'm an absolute sucker for revenge movies. So
Blue Ruin. Yeah.
Blue Ruin was. As a classic, that one's so good. I love revenge movies, and I did like this movie. I gave it a 3 out of 5 through and through. After everything, after all my calculations, I decided a 3 out of 5 is what it was worth. I did not give it the old heart on Letterboxd. Didn't like it. I love it, I should say. I liked it, and it was a 3 out of 5, but I didn't really love it. It was just solid. And
I think what pushes it to
I would be interested in her previous movies.
Yeah,
is kind of what I'm getting at.
I'm seeing, and that's what I was actually going to say is the testament to me about how I feel about that movie is it made me want to see her other work. It didn't make me not want to watch it because I'm like, the reason I kind of wanted to, I pushed it up to a 4 is almost because of like it looks like somebody had a vision for that. Like this is someone that had to, like a person made this movie. It wasn't a studio. It feels like an individual vision, and like I don't see as many
sorely lacking these days.
I don't see as many small budget movies, and even then, the ones I do like feel like they are just small budget movies, right? This feels like this person's vision of a very like it feels so art. It feels like why we want diverse people making diverse art out there, so stuff like this exists. I'm just like I'm happy something like this exists, and it like has Demi Moore acting like she hasn't been in stuff in a long time, and like I don't know. So like all that stuff makes me it's this intangible thing that almost bumps it up to be.
Yeah, you appreciate it. Yeah,
it's kind of one of those like it's greater than the sum of its parts. Like individually, I think each aspect is good to great, but altogether, I think makes a really cool movie that just did not sit well in my tummy. But and it was interesting is over time the stuff I disliked has decreased and the stuff I liked increased. I'll tell you, talking about the stuff I liked, I was like, man, I forgot how cool that was. So I think over time, my liking of it will probably increase.
It's interesting how we discussing these movies usually changes how we feel about them.
Yeah, I think in general, like ironically, it made me like Inception less. No, I'm sorry, not Inception, Interstellar less, but not in a bad way of like acknowledging, like, oh yeah, you're right. That is a thing I totally overlooked and isn't as well thought out. And my headcanon is why it's good.
Yeah, exactly.
So I think we tend to bring each other to a more honest average. And we're usually, it's funny, is I don't think we've come into one of these except for Furiosa where we're basically on the same page.
Yeah, just in full agreement, right?
But weirdly enough, this is a pretty good conversation, even though we came in kind of opposite ends.
Yes. Yeah, you came in giving it a 0 out of 5, and now suddenly you're a 4 out of 5.
Yeah.
What I wanted to talk about, there's a couple things, and I, despite like being critical and reviewing movies, sometimes I am pretty dumb. There's a lot of messaging that maybe I don't get or I don't think about, and one of them I feel like is in this movie, and I want to bring it up to you to see if you can think of anything. It might be simpler than I'm also making it out to be, but it was the use of color in this movie. Yellow, orange, and red were all very specifically used. Now, the color yellow, the movie, the substance, the company, was yellow on black. That was like their color scheme. The color yellow on black. And the movie opens with this egg yolk, like you said earlier, being injected with this and then splitting in two. So I get that the yellow represents yolk, the birthing of life, the beginnings, the origins, whatever it is, yolk, the nucleus thing,
the
that
sun,
makes things
the start
live.
of a day, yeah.
Sure. So yellow was a very prominent color in that it's the color of the company. It's also the color of the coat that Elizabeth wore. The whole movie, anytime she went outside, she was wearing this bright yellow coat. So she was always wearing yellow. Now, orange came into play as the color of the hallway, which they went back to multiple times. The hallway in the production studio. Yeah, the network, whatever. I'll just call it the production studio where they record Elizabeth's exercise show and then eventually Sue's exercising show. That big hallway they go back to 5, 6, 7 times, and it's just orange. It's just the most classic orange, big long hallway that had all the posters up of Elizabeth. And then when she got in the car accident and retired, they took them all down, so it became very, very stark in there.
It's just an
empty canvas.
I didn't realize it was the same hallway when like Elizabeth gets fired because they took down all the posters. I was like, oh, that's where this is. I thought it was a totally different location. So yeah,
So then Sue does her first recording, and now they put up a poster of her on the wall. So now it's this giant empty hallway, but with one poster of Sue, representing like probably, basically her first year of work. Like we said before, Demi Moore, the hallway was full of herself because she had done all these things over the years. Then, so we have yellow, we have that hallway being orange, and then we have red, which, and orange was Dennis Quaid eating the shrimp in that restaurant in the beginning, all orange, very orange. He was wearing an orange suit at the end of the movie as well. So then you have red, which was the bathrooms. The bathroom that she goes in the very beginning is stark red. There's another bathroom scene at the end where everything is bright red, and then of course there's a lot of blood in the movie, also red. And those were the extremely prominent three colors of the movie: yellow, orange, and red, and I don't know what to make of them. I'm talking about it. Maybe that's all it was, light symbolism, but like I don't really get what orange is. Is it simply just, yellow to orange to red from birth to death? Does the blood of red have more meaning for women and like menstruation? Does orange represent limbo? Like I don't really know what to make of the colors.
Okay.
But I noticed them.
Okay. It's very interesting. I had no thoughts. I had not noticed or...
I thought you might not have.
So I Googled it, and
Oh, while I was talking?
Yeah,
okay.
because I wanted to see...
Nice.
I was like, oh...
Totally not rude at all. That's fine.
I didn't read anything from Google. I just put it and hit enter, and I just...
You just put red, yellow, or yellow, orange,
No, I said
red,
color meaning in the substance.
Oh, okay.
I'm an expert Googler, okay? I know it will work.
Sure. Yep.
And there's an article from the Variety about that specifically, and it's about the purest of perfection leads to self-destruction. So you're right in that those are like the different stages, and red being the, if you think about self-destruction at the end, like kind of, that is at least what some people are. So I think there's lots of ways to interpret it. I thought of it as kind of like orange. It's like the cycles of life, like life being the youthful, like anything's possible. Orange is like kind of what the reality of life, like this is the work that you're doing. And then red is kind of death, right? It's the end. And
we have Julianne, in the beginning of the movie, she's in the bathroom when we're first introduced to Dennis Quaid, where he's, just shit talking women basically, and where we're introduced, basically foreshadowed that Demi Moore is going to be pushed out. So I guess that's sort of, her death sentence kind of happened in that bathroom where it was red. I just don't get why, of course the sun and sunsets, yellow, orange, red, there's autumn, the falling of leaves. First they turn yellow, then orange, and then red. So I get that, right? Birth to death. I just don't get why Dennis Quaid was orange, why the hallway was orange.
I think it just represents middle age, like the pursuit of like halfway between birth and death, right? Isn't that kind of the idea?
I guess Dennis Quaid is what you have to deal with in the middle,
right? Like he is
of like getting shit on, getting manipulated. This is like the struggle of life, and then red is where, it all ends.
I would have to read some more, but like in my mind, it at least represents the timeline. But I guess your question is more like why represent it to begin with?
Yeah, and I always hate Googling things afterwards because it makes me feel fucking stupid.
Oh, and so this is actually
figure stuff out myself.
Something I wanted to say of like why I felt like halfway through giving up, I was like, this movie is smarter than I am. I just don't. I know that the person saying these things is saying something smarter than I'm hearing, and I'm almost frustrated that I don't get it because I want to get it.
I want to talk about that too. I almost think contrary. This is one of those movies where it does, I will say, I gave it a 3 out of 5, but that's mostly because I guess we haven't talked so much about things we didn't like, weirdly. We've talked about what made us uncomfortable. We haven't talked about what we actively didn't like. The one thing was, at the end of the movie, or towards the end of the movie, there's like a minor in-universe issue, is what I would call it, that we had with, like portraying the destruction, but then also it not matching what's actually happening. That was kind of like, okay, they could have done that better. But something else, fuck, dude, I distracted myself. I was going to say what I didn't like about it, and now I can't remember what I didn't like.
I can tell you, and the other big thing to me was that I think it escalated the absurdism a bit too much, kind of out of nowhere, and I think like it was already absurd, and then like when it ramped up the more, it didn't feel like it made sense to ramp it up the way they did. It felt like they were almost trying to be too funny about it, like too black. Oh, there you go.
Okay, now I'm remembering. You were saying you felt like you were too dumb to watch the movie in a way. This is one thing I really didn't like about this movie was, and a lot of movies do this, where they also probably think to themselves, well, the audience watching this isn't going to be smart enough to pick this up, where they do either flashbacks or like audio in head callbacks. This movie did it a lot towards the end, and it was pissing me off because you sort of hinted at it earlier. You didn't say it directly, but it was like this movie is so ham-fisted, right? It's like punching you in the face with what it's trying to tell you. And then on top of it, they give you no room to think or reflect by throwing this narration callback stuff. And I think it does a massive disservice to this movie. I think narration does a massive disservice to most movies where they feel the need to do that kind of shit. And this movie did that, where it was like, there was, I can't remember specifically, but they did it about 5 or 6 times at the end of the movie. There was even one point where Demi Moore's character, Elizabeth, wakes up and she sees a big bouquet of roses in her apartment, and there's a note on it that says, "They're gonna love you." And, you know, let's see, how do I articulate this? The bouquet of flowers is for Sue, for her younger self, and she sees that, and of course we know what this character's been through, why she created this younger version of herself. She wants to be loved, you know. She's been put into this machine, this machine of Hollywood and success, and have it, like, needing to be needed and wanted and loved. So immediately you can see this and go like, oh, Demi Moore, one of two things will happen. She'll either see this and maybe be like resentful of her younger self being loved and her older self not being loved, or it'll be, you know, conflicting, because she'll go like, oh, I remember how good that feels. I want my younger self to have that. But instead of us being able to actually, like, think about this and dissect it, they basically just do a stupid fucking voiceover later where it shows it cuts to a flashback of this bouquet with the note on it, and you hear some nondescript voice saying, "Oh, they're gonna love you." It's like, hey, remember when this happened before? And it's like, I'm kind of rambling all over the place, but I think you get what I'm trying to say. Is that they don't.
Yes. So that is my problem. Is that this is the exact complaint I have.
They did it a bunch of times.
They ramp it up.
They did these callbacks to these one-liners.
And at first, when they reference the substance, when they show the, like, "you are one," to me that's like a stylistic cool thing. But this at the end, when they're like, no, this is what they're thinking. It's like I could see her look at that card and come to that conclusion, and that I think that's why at some point I'm like, well, there must be the subtle stuff, like with the colors, is the more what elevates this to be done by an artist is the stuff I'm not hearing, because all I can hear is the obvious shit. That obviously that's what this movie's about. What are you saying? What those messages? I'm like, this is, and it's the way it's shot and like that stuff is where it's like, that's art. You're doing it in a different way to say something extra that I'm not hearing, because all I'm hearing is the obvious, you know. Being vain is really bad for lots of people. It's like kind of obvious of like, yeah, I agree. I think you're representing it well. There must be something else you're saying that's elevating this that I'm not hearing.
Yeah, and the movie obviously touches on subjects of self-loathing, self-esteem issues, confidence issues, all these things. But it doesn't really give you a chance to kind of marinate and think about them. Interestingly, you said you haven't been able to stop thinking about this movie. I stopped thinking about it like immediately, because, you know, it was an open shut book. It's like, if there was any subtlety, they ruined it with these stupid callbacks and flashback imagery and reminding you what they're trying to say. It left no room for me to actually kind of postulate. I just like,
that's why.
Okay, there it all is. I got it.
My anger with the movie helped, because it made me think about it. Because I was like, "What the fuck was that?" And I was like, "Oh, okay, well, you know." And so then I talked myself down. So that the irony of me liking it less up front has probably done it better. But I think the big thing also, or like, unfortunately for me, the story collapsing under, or like the movie itself to me, like, being unwatchable at some point, like, is pretty damning for my enjoyment of it. And like, that's why that's kind of like all my complaints. There weren't very many, but they were so massive, or such a core part of the watching experience, that like it brought it down a lot. You know, it's one thing when you have a lot of little complaints that can ruin something. This is like, well, there's only 2 things, but they're like, your message is too obvious, and I didn't like how gross you were.
Yeah.
Is like, well, that's like
Yeah.
all of it.
Yeah, that's like how I felt about Interstellar. Was just every single scene. I was like, oh, that was stupid. Oh, that bothered me. Oh my god, why'd they do that? It's funny that Interstellar is almost is like our
Punching back here.
yeah, or I can't think of the words. My brain is no good, but it's sort of the metric for how we determine a movie that's like high in quality and technical quality, but low in like everything else quality. That's basically what Interstellar is to me. It's like, yeah, I guess I don't know, story and script versus actual movie, whatever. Anyways, last thing I wanted to talk about, which probably could have talked about in the beginning, was the audio. Shouldn't be able to talk about it too long, but the audio in this movie was mixed very interestingly. It felt like there was a lack of directional audio, where the audio was extremely clear and it felt like it was in your head. You know, they would do a lot of close-ups of like hands touching things and moving things, and like they would, as we mentioned earlier, there's close-ups of Dennis Quaid eating, and it's just absolutely fucking disgusting. And it's not because you're watching him eat; it's also because the audio is mixed, where it sounds like it's in your head. It's just at the front of your sensory experience. It's the audio in this movie was like that the whole time.
I listened to it on headphones, and
Me too.
I can tell you that's something I actually forgot to bring up is when that man was like measuring her spine. I was like, "Oh, you'd be a good candidate." I was so weirded out because it seemed like he was ADR'd, but I think that was on purpose, like because he's supposed to look
and there's
weird.
They add also little squiggly and squishies and scrunchies and squirting sounds. So like when he was kind of touching her spine, you could suddenly hear like as he's touching her, and like
I wasn't crazy.
They obviously. No, for sure not. It was again assaulting. This movie as a whole, if I could use one word to describe this movie, it was assaulting. From audio to visual to even the fucking ham-fisted nature of the messages it was trying to give me. Everything was just I was being assaulted the whole movie.
Yes, and I think
Where
oh crap,
Yeah,
I
go
had
ahead.
something to bounce off of that with, but it's escaped me, so ignore me.
it wasn't about audio or headphones or the assaulting experience.
Yeah,
of the sound and the
assaulting
characters.
experience. I think that at the end of the day is like what I think I realize is just that level of assaulting just it doesn't work for me. So like that feeling I think is good for the film, but I don't know if it's as this is one of those movies that it's like weird. It's like I didn't enjoy watching it, but I like kind of want people to see it. I don't know. It's like I want someone else to like watch it and like tell me what they think because that's something that I think is really good about this movie in that it's like I don't feel 100% about it every time I talk about it. Like, do I like that or not? Like, I kind of go back and forth, and I think it's just interesting art, and I think that's why I'm feeling more positive about it because I'm like, this is so much more interesting than any movie I've talked about so far. I enjoyed Furiosa by far the most, but like talking about the substance is more interesting to me than talking about Furiosa was.
True, and that's honestly why it kind of felt like we had a hard time talking about Furiosa, is because we both really liked it and we were both all on board with the same things. So, we still, of course, managed to crank out an hour and a half of freaking audio as we're on track to do with this one. But I think we're actually very close to wrapping this one up. But yeah, I found it the hardest to talk about Furiosa just because I liked so much of it. And you liked all the same things, and we just kind of didn't have much to bounce back and forth on. But this one, I'm glad you had strong feelings about certain stuff, and
it's weird.
It's much more interesting when we have sort of opposite feelings on something.
But it's weird is that like we seem to be both agreeing
Also
about a lot of it. But I will say it's the first movie I have ever seen that it said I never want to watch this again. But I think that everyone like I would suggest recommend it to people who think it sounds interesting. Like, I think anyone on the fence should watch it that is on the fence because it's just weird and cool.
The only other opinion I have is that of Andrew Yehofa Shank, and he gave it a 1 star. He hated it. He thought it was terrible. He said it. The one thing though he actually said about it, because his reviews are really not reviews most of the time, but he said it was so boring. That's the problem he had with it. He saw it with his girlfriend Whitney. They said they almost walked out of the theater. They were so bored.
Really?
So I found that interesting. That is what his problem was with that movie. Where for me, I did not find myself bored.
I think,
but
yeah,
Andrew is also like a super genius, and he dissects movies like. Okay, you know when the movie Arrival.
Yes.
I don't know why I started the sentence like that. The movie Arrival, Andrew, I'm not kidding you, like 20 minutes in, basically as soon as they started communicating with the aliens and the aliens were showing, the circular symbols, Andrew already figured out what the movie was. He was like, oh, these are probably aliens from the future and they communicate with like some kind of time language. He just like knew.
I hope he didn't read the short story and pretended he didn't.
What? No, because they referenced, it's actually ridiculous. They referenced a specific like philosopher or something that Andrew is very familiar with, and he knew the
never mind, you're
like
right.
motifs and the topics he talks about. That philosopher talks about. He's like, he's like very obsessed with time and the circular nature of things. So Andrew like pieced it together immediately. Whereas us morons have to be hit in the head. See, that's why sometimes being ham-fisted is good, but like I don't know, Arrival's really cool. Anyways, so Andrew might have just like seen the writing on the wall right away.
Yeah, for sure.
I don't know. Now that we talk about it, I did too. Obviously, we knew what this movie was going to be about. It was going to be about like exploitation, themes of the self, how you feel about things, yourself, good or bad. But I wasn't bored.
And I think it can be of like, what do they find not boring? Like, and I do think that there isn't a lot of like violent horror-y stuff. Is like the body horror pops up and then it's really intense, and then it's just like a very interesting, cool movie. I just feel like stuff happens, but not like in a horror movie or action movie like event set piece. I don't know. So like, if those are the only pieces that are keeping you there because everything else isn't doing it for you, then yeah.
If you don't care about the messaging and you don't really care for the body horror, it doesn't like excite you at all, then there's probably not much to watch.
Yeah, because like you read the plot and like what happens is very quick and simplistic, but a lot of that movie is about being in the space and feeling what the characters are feeling and like just kind of soaking it in. And if those things don't work, like if you don't engage with this art that way, you're right. Objectively, that movie could have been an hour 20 minutes easy if they cut out a lot of the unnecessary scenes. That's why I was like, this is an art movie, because like it wants you to feel and sit there and absorb and be uncomfortable and And if you're not here for movies to feel that type of experience, I know it would. I'm not saying he isn't, but for sure that would how you could find it boring, I guess, because I just don't think it sits still. There's no scene that lasts long enough to get bored. It just keeps going.
Yeah, it did feel long. As with most movies these days, it probably could have been 20 minutes shorter.
Easily.
But it did a good job of building up these characters really, I don't know. Yeah, it was a bit circular at points, and as we've said a bunch of times, it was very ham-fisted, so they definitely could have cut stuff out, left more to the audience to think over, mull over.
This feels like a Blade Runner director's cut could like have a totally different like reception type stuff, where I feel like you could just make changes to what's already been filmed and I think have an experience I would like more.
I agree. Yeah, there's almost no movie that benefits from voiceover narration. I don't know.
Unless I will say that the scenario, if you're doing a murder mystery and it's the big like reveal and then they show you like all the moments in which it was like dangled in front of you and you missed it, I love that. That's a good when they flip.
See, I don't, because then you don't have to rewatch it.
Yeah, that's awesome.
Oh, okay.
That's a fair point, but like, I didn't even think about it that way, because a lot of like those types of stories to me is the thrill of watching it unravel, not reliving a solved. Like, to me, That's why spoilers to me, I think, are like legitimate, can ruin only one type of fiction, and that is where it's kind of like a whodunit type thing. For me, that's the main reason I like that stuff. That's why I never replay like a lot of games that are narrative focused exclusively, because like I don't know, I don't rewatch stuff. That's my weird thing. If you didn't tell me to rewatch Interstellar, I would have gone my whole life and never watched it again.
Sure.
I just rewatching
now
this
you have a newfound hatred for it.
Yeah, it's like there isn't enough stuff that I have seen once, and I still don't bring myself to watch it. Like I just tend to not rewatch stuff unless someone else is like engaging with it. Like I'd never watch Oppenheimer again in my life if I could help it. But if someone wants to watch it, I'd be cool. I'd be down for it.
Yeah, actually, I've been wanting to rewatch it. I was so impressed with that movie.
I'm afraid for you to rewatch it and you find out that it's just Interstellar 2.
Yeah, no. Speaking of rewatching or not rewatching, we're not going to rewatch anything. For next week, I think we should do the TV show Arcane.
Ooh, okay. I'll have to actually resubscribe to Netflix. Finally.
Oh no! Fuck! Don't do that.
No, I look. It's for 1 month. Like they can take $8 or whatever, and that's like renting it. It's all good. Arcane seems like it'll be worth giving it $8. You know.
I wanted because there's 2 seasons. The second season just came out. I wanted to do a season 1 review and a season 2 review, which might require more than a month. Fuck, wait, how long is this show? Can we even... I haven't started it. I haven't done anything. So can we do all this for next week? Do I really...
We might... I am going to go on a limb.
If the episodes are 20-minute episodes, then yeah, we can crush... All right,
season 1 has 9 episodes.
Yeah.
Come on, Wikipedia. Don't make me I have to pull it up. So there's 18 total episodes, and it looks like they're on average between 39 and 50. So they're probably like 45 minutes each.
45-minute episodes. Yeah, fuck, that might be hard to watch by next week. But I think that's what we should aim for.
Yeah.
Maybe we could watch half of the season and do a mid-season review and milk this to fucking 5 episodes.
Make it that December we're going to review Arcane through December.
Yeah, no, I do not want to do that. So... we'll try that for next week, and if it doesn't end up working out, we'll just do something else and surprise people.
Okay.
But for now, that's probably what I think we should
Sounds good to me.
Okay. Well, that's it then for this one. The Substance. Go see it or don't. I don't know.
Do whatever you want. It's fine.
It's fine. It was cool. It was... Like you said, it's probably worth watching. I don't want to recommend a 2.5-hour movie to somebody that's just cool. Like, it needs to be great if you're going to commit 2.5 hours of your life to it. But
yeah,
it's probably worth it if you just kind of like movies and you're not super critical and you just like horror.
If you want a wild ride, like it is wild. Just kind of like it's hard for me not to feel kind of like everyone just give it a shot. It's cool. All right. Well, I'm gonna go.
Good way to put it. Yep.
Thank you for listening, everybody. Bye bye.
Yep. See you later.